Story 1. Being harmed by my great-grandfather, telling my family, then them saying if I told my great-grandmother she would literally die. Story 2. Losing my fiancée 36 hours after I proposed in 2009 due to a pulmonary embolism from her birth control. She was a beautiful soul and left us way too soon. I did all I could to save her, and it was not enough. Don't be sad they are gone. Be happy they lived and you were part of their life. All my love, forever love. I will see you again, but I have some life to live first. Story 3. Living with an alcoholic as a kid is an absolute nightmare. People wanting to ban cannabis because it is harmful but are okay with alcohol being legal are some of the most ignorant individuals alive. Story 4. Watching my brother commit suicide right in front of my mom and me happened over 10 years ago, and it has affected us both deeply in many ways. Story 5. I had a terrible birth experience last year when I gave birth to my son. I got the epidural with my first child, and everything went smoothly, so I planned to have it this time as well. This time, it was at a different hospital. I went to get the epidural when I started progressing in labor. The woman administering it was a practicing anesthesiologist but not very experienced, which we did not know until much later. She ended up poking me in the spine 2 to 3 times. Each time, I knew something was wrong. I had unusual tingling in my neck, and my chest felt like someone was sitting on it. It hurt a lot, which is not supposed to happen because the area is numbed. It turned out she caused my spinal fluid to leak. After the epidural was removed following my son's birth, I experienced the most excruciating headache, neck, and back pain I have ever had. I could not breastfeed or hold my son for more than a few minutes. I was hospitalized for a week and had to be transferred to another hospital for a procedure called a blood patch, which is meant to fill the gaps in the spine to stop the fluid leak. The doctor performing the procedure said I came close to being paralyzed. I was then transported back to the first hospital. The night after I gave birth, the night nurse was very brutal and mean. I asked for help to get to the bathroom because I was in severe pain and could barely walk. The nurse told me, "All you did was have a baby, you're fine," and proceeded to watch me struggle to get to the bathroom. Even after the procedure, I could barely move for several months. I am now terrified of trusting any anesthesiologist or nurses and have decided not to have any more children. Story 6. My mom. I was subjected to physical and emotional abuse by the person who was supposed to take care of me. Story 7. Being groomed and sexually abused when I was 15 by a man in his 30s has deeply affected me. Today, I cannot accept compliments or any positive attention from men. If I see a car on the road that resembles his, I pull over and hyperventilate. I cannot kiss anyone who smells of cigarettes. I struggle with intimacy and personal insecurity. Even in a healthy relationship, I question every move I make and blame myself for any problems. Leave teenagers alone. Although the abuse was probably brief and insignificant in his mind, the damage those few years caused me will last a lifetime. Story 8. In Iraq, we went on patrols daily. After a few weeks, a man tried attacking the gate to our base and was literally ripped to pieces by bullets. Then his chest rig exploded. Most of his remains were scattered and unrecognizable, except for the left arm, some neck, and the upper portion of his face, meaning upper jaw, nose, eyes, and general skull. Some of the head was missing, but enough remained to easily identify him if you saw a picture. Because of my position in the convoy, I had the unique opportunity to park beside his remains daily due to vehicle spacing requirements. I watched as blood and brain matter seeped, swarms of flies gathered, slow rot and dehydration occurred, and gradual consumption by maggots took place. This lasted for 7 months. I don't want to say it was traumatic in the sense that I was harmed by it, given my occupation, but it stuck with me. The smell of charring meat varied. Some days it was worse than others. One of our other platoons was on split-section convoy and was hit hard by an improvised explosive device. 3 of the 5 occupants were killed, and 1 died later. 1 man was ejected from the truck, missing his legs and an arm. Locals reached him first and were likely going to make an example out of him through torture, but they did not have enough time because we arrived at the site quickly. However, the locals had enough time to pull him away from the wreckage, stuff him in a pile of trash, and cover his remaining body with bags and cardboard to hide him so we would not recover him. We found him because he was actively moving his remaining arm and shifting the trash. He still died from blood loss and shock, but he was not taken, tortured, mutilated, or beheaded. I am thankful for that. Story 9. Having a home destroyed by a tornado at night while I was inside. Having a child born with a defect that required surgery and then developing meningitis. Story 10. The man who assaulted me. I don't know his name, he was a complete stranger. I remember his face clearly all the time. I can recall being there as if I am there right now. I remember it more vividly than my own bedroom. Finally, after 2 years, I have reached out for some support. I am scared, but this is definitely the first step. Story 11. My ex-boyfriend passed away in October. He reached out to me 2 days before he passed after going no contact for over a month. He treated me terribly yet painted me as the crazy stalker ex-girlfriend, even though he was always the first to reach out. When he passed away, I was informed by one of his girlfriends who stated that I could not attend the funeral or any other services for him. I was not planning on going, but the way he managed to still break me even in death absolutely traumatized me. Story 12. My 23-year-old sister died from a brain aneurysm on a normal day with no previous health problems. If I did not have my child, I might have taken my own life. Story 13. The man who tried to kidnap me over 30 years ago when I was 8, and myself when I wanted to end my life as a teenager and was bullied in school. I try to keep these memories out of my mind, but when I drive by that area, I experience what I believe are post-traumatic stress disorder flashbacks. I wish I had the money to move to a distant place so I never have to see that area again. Story 14. The realization that I have no tribe. I was only led to believe I was part of it while they interfered with my life. It took me 45 years to figure out what was wrong. Story 15. My last landlord and home share provider, it was never a normal living situation. She always yelled at me, took advantage of me, and used my kindness against me. She was 75 years old, and I took care of her, even saved her life. A few weeks later, she went back to abusing me. Story 16. My mother was psychotic. I was molested as a child, and she said, "What do you want me to do about it?" When I was 11, I was hit by a drunk driver on the sidewalk, and she called me a cripple. Then she intentionally deported herself to her home country, saying my half-sister, who she abandoned, was going to take care of her and that I was useless. I was 18. A month later, she called me begging for money. I am now 30 and sending her money because she is a useless and pathetic woman. But I love her. I am an alcoholic and drug addict. I do not blame her, but the pain was too much. My father is an angel. He has been very patient with me. He knows the pain I am in. I met a man in rehabilitation who was a little younger than me. I am 30, and he was 25. He was incredibly sweet. Then he told me he was going to prison. I asked why. He said it was for fleeing the police, but something sounded off, so I searched for his charges, and it was for hurting a 12-year-old girl. There were articles and everything. That was 3 weeks ago, and I have been drinking every day since because I am so disgusted. I want to die. Story 17. My dad eating a bullet is pretty damaging to start, but I think what affected me the most was picking his brains out of the carpet. I couldn't let my mom see it or walk into that room and see anything from what happened. I needed her to focus on herself and getting through the tragedy. So I cleaned everything before she came back into the house. I have been in therapy for over a decade, but I will never be okay. Story 18. Betrayal by my mother always pitted me against my siblings. She took the side of anyone who harmed me, claimed ownership of anything that belonged to me, and blamed me for destroying her life because she got pregnant and had to get married. If I received any attention, she would say mean things about me. I am remembering this now because I responded. Story 19. When I was younger, my uncle physically abused me and threatened me with a gun to teach me not to hang out in the streets. Story 20. My ex exhibited jealous, controlling, and suspicious behavior. Those kinds of games were awful. At least he apologized afterward once I broke up with him, but I am still traumatized. Story 21. I have experienced several traumas that led to a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, including an abusive relationship, an alcoholic parent, and a near-death accident. However, nothing has affected me more deeply than severe depression. Story 22, Ex-wife. Untreated bipolar disorder is not only ugly, it is mean, vicious, and dangerous. Instead of taking a mood stabilizer, she brought in a church group to cleanse the house of evil spirits. It did not work since there are no such things. Here is the highlight reel. Tried to start a fire in the backyard. Pretended she could no longer speak English. Took off to Florida for a month and a half with virtually no notice and no job, leaving me to pay and care for everything, including our pets, for half a season. Called the police on me for abuse that never happened. This hurt the most. 13 years together with not a finger laid on her, and she alleged abuse to get a restraining order and take the house. Got arrested. Became pregnant while we were separated and tried to hide it from the courts during our divorce and from her own lawyer. Defrauded the government to the amount of $43,750. Story 23, Cancer. I lost my dad to lung cancer when he was 54 and I was 30. I lost my wife to colon cancer when she was 37 and I was 42. I was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer myself at 41. I am now 44. I have been undergoing chemotherapy and raising a son as a single parent since 2023. Cancer is difficult, but I am at least blessed with good doctors and a great support network of friends and family. Story 24. Being abandoned by your own church. I was 15 and participating in a walk for Jesus, where we went around holding signs for love and peace. I ended up getting lost in a city I was not familiar with. I walked through sketchy back neighborhoods and along the highway until I called my mom crying. They were able to direct me back to the church. I expected my church, pastor, and those participating to be there, but it was only my dad in his gray van, and the church was locked up and closed for the day. I felt like a fool walking around with a sign that said, "Jesus loves you," and being abandoned by the people who were supposed to be there for me. It really messed me up, and I never went back to a church after that day. My mom only received a half-hearted apology from the pastor as well. Story 25. My mom's friend was in an abusive relationship. She and her children stayed the night with us once at our apartment. The following morning, my mom, brother, and sister were walking out the door when her boyfriend was there waiting and shoved them aside. I came out of my room because I heard yelling and screaming, only to see my mom's friend being stabbed repeatedly. I managed to grab her children and ran out the back door into the courtyard, where I begged a neighbor to call emergency services. Sometime between me running out and crying to the neighbor, the boyfriend also ran out, and I saw him stab himself in the chest and neck. I was only 14. Story 26. The 3 girls who sexually assaulted me at age 11 held my arms, grabbed my genitals, then kicked them. The boy in class sexually assaulted me over a few months by repeatedly touching my nipples at age 15. First experience. It is very hard to trust women. It is difficult for me to form relationships with them. Second experience. Easier to handle since I do not date men. I do not need them. I work through it at the gym. I am no longer a small, helpless person. I am short but very strong and muscular. I was very foolish not to report it. I do not blame anyone for my poor decisions. I take full accountability. Story 27. For me, I hate to say this, but Christians, though I realize not all of them are bad, especially the holier-than-thou ones who use the Bible to degrade or put others down, have made me question my faith more than anything else. However, it has not turned me away from God. I think it is kind of pathetic that people use religion as an excuse to hurt others. To me, that is downright blasphemy. Even though I feel this way about some Christians, not all, I will end by saying good luck and God bless. Story 28. Difficult choice between my mother, who caused mental and physical abuse, and a girl I used to be friends with who was a bully. She publicly humiliated and manipulated messages before sharing them on Facebook. I lost many friends because of that, my reputation was damaged, and I felt like I could not go out or risk being seen by anyone. Story 29. My parents decided to move us back to their country when I was a freshman in high school. I did not speak, read, or write the language. I went from being on the high honor roll to attending high school in a different country without knowing how to read. Story 30. My exes. I have been completely single for 5 years, mostly on purpose. While I feel like I have healed, stood up for myself, and made progress, I still notice that if I hear or see something similar to my last relationships, I overthink and go back to the bad moments. I would love to have a boyfriend again, but I know I get taken advantage of in every way very easily, so I do not put myself or someone else in that position again. I still have trust issues. Story 31. High school is the worst. Kids are either being bullied or are bullies. It is just a few years as a teenager, but everyone comes out with scars. Speak firmly and increase the volume. Story 32. Father was mentally and physically abusive. Mother was emotionally unavailable due to the abuse she suffered from my father. Story 33. My former best friend. I now have trust issues and subconsciously push people away. It took me about 2 years to finally connect with another person and let my guard down. Story 34. Stepdad for sure. I am on disability because of the trauma he intentionally inflicted on me as a child. Story 35. The ex who promised me the world and everything in it only to get into my pants and tell me he was not ready for a relationship. Literally the morning after he got me to bed. I never fully recovered from that shock. Story 36. The heart attack I had at the end of April. I had 5 stents inserted into my arteries, and I had a 60% blockage. Story 37. My ex-mother-in-law. I left my country, where I had a good job, to come to this country with her son. She was jealous when her son treated me nicely. She verbally abused me and called me stupid and useless, even though I had a job and contributed to the family. She called my family parasites because I sent my money back home to support my sick mother and my nearly 100-year-old grandmother. I suffered from depression and saw a therapist for nearly 2 years to recover. She is dying now from cancer. I do not wish her well. All the husbands left her because of her behavior, and now her son has left her. She will have to live with her loneliness. Story 38. My sister's ex-fiancé, who is also the brother of my sister's best friend, raped me the first time I got drunk. It happened with my door open at my mother's house. I was aware of everything that was happening but could neither move nor speak. That was 16 years ago, and I have never processed it. Story 39. My mom committed suicide and left me alone. My ex and his family completely ruined my perspective on relationships. I am done with relationships. Story 40. Being bullied as a child. I was bullied by my mom, my sister, many other kids and teens at school, and a French teacher. I still struggle with my self-worth and confidence, and I am 36 years old. Perhaps you could attribute this to my autism and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and being so outwardly different from others that I am not seen as normal enough to be treated right. Story 41. My ex-husband kidnapped my children. I got them back and gained full custody. They are adults now, but when that happened, it was horribly traumatizing. Story 42. My stepfather was emotionally and physically abusive, especially towards me. I have a poor self-image today, and many things I do still make me feel guilty or bad. Story 43. I said in a previous post that I am traumatized by the movie E.T. Why? I do not know. However, my parents, who are divorced, both agree that they believe my maternal grandmother had something to do with it. It is the only thing they can agree on. Story 44. My uncle, who was a helicopter pilot, raised me. My dad moved to the United States when I was 6, so I mostly saw my mom at night and on weekends because she was a doctor. Story 45. Despite all the abuse, neglect, and eventual abandonment by my mom, I would say a guy I met at a job when I was 18 would have made a great cult leader. Charismatic, persuasive, one of the nicest guys I ever met until he was not. I am a man and at that time was looking for validation in illegitimate places. Long story short, I got to know him and his wife. He convinced me to move in with them. I started doing more drugs than I already was and lost my job. He told me I needed to contribute, and I started running drugs for him from the city to the smaller towns where we lived. He would regularly beat his wife and told me I was disposable. He said I would get worse if I ever turned on him or went against him and claimed he had connections to law enforcement, which was a lie. This continued for another year until I witnessed something that traumatizes me to this day and that I have only told one person about. I was a coward back then, but I had saved enough cash to get away one day when he and his wife were out of town. I took what little I had and had a distant relative pick me up with no questions asked. I have not seen or spoken to him since. From some social media searching, she eventually left him and is now married with a good family. Story 46. Mr. Hall, my 5th grade teacher, followed by Mrs. Hunt, my 7th grade teacher. I hope they are both stuck in a Pilates class in hell. Story 47. Flat infiltration by mice that laid eggs and created more mice. The worst few months ever. No help from the building administration. I used gum traps and saw mice trapped in them. Their screams were audible. When I went to pick them up to dispose of them, I saw that the mice tried hard to get off, and their skin got torn, causing visible wounds. I tried everything, kept my room locked all the time, always checked before coming out or going into the room, and sealed it with covers. I cried a lot during that time. It was one of the worst and most traumatizing experiences. Story 48. This sounds absolutely insane, but the government and court system, a specific agency came into my life over 15 years ago and really affected me. It gave me post-traumatic stress disorder and everything. Corruption is a deep and pervasive issue. It is frustrating to wait for someone, anyone, to say, "Hey, this is not right," only for it never to happen. You just keep being wronged for years until there is no strength left to continue. Story 49. My dad was a preacher and he was also abusive. He was so strict that I had to wear skirts twice a week to school to remain feminine. He hit me when I came home from my first day of high school wearing eye makeup. When I turned 18, he became an atheist and told me that all the beliefs he forced upon me were lies and that I was stupid for believing them. I am in my 40s now, and he is a sad, angry old man. That experience continues to affect my mental health. Story 50. I moved to a different state with my boyfriend, only to find out that the state we moved to was where his other girlfriend lived. Story 51. The movie Arachnophobia. I have a fear of spiders and their relatives that I cannot explain. It is very bad. The last time I saw a scorpion, which was the size of a penny, I cried nonstop and had an anxiety attack for 1 hour straight. My neighbor came to the house because he heard me crying and thought someone had broken in. So yeah, it was a bad decision to let a 6-year-old watch that movie. I am 39 now. Story 52. Hurricane Katrina. I was in AmeriCorps National Civilian Community Corps when it happened. We were some of the first people sent down a few days before landfall to set up relief efforts, operate shelters, and assist with the overall aftermath. We were preparing for a typical hurricane, having already experienced a few that season. However, as we all know, things went very wrong quickly. We were just a group of young adults fresh out of college, not fully prepared for the challenges we faced, but we completed the work. Story 53. Going to jail at age 51. Stay-at-home mother of 4 children. The youngest was 13. I got pulled over at 3 a.m. while on my way home from dumpster diving. I consented to a search and breathalyzer, passed both, but then he asked if I would give blood. I said, okay, why not? I asked if I should follow them, but no. They took me to the back of the police car. Then they let me go home, but my car was towed, and I had to call for a ride. A month later, I received mail saying I had opiates in my system and it was an automatic driving under the influence offense. Highest degree. I finally figured out it was half of a 5 milligrams pain pill I took for my back 2 days prior to being pulled over. I can't prove it though. Long story short, I paid $6,000 for a shady, rip-off attorney. I went to jail for 30 days over Thanksgiving and Christmas. Then they didn't let me out. They sent me to inpatient rehab for 31 days. They tried to extend it, but my insurance said no. They had already extended the 15 days to 31 at their request. So they recommended I go to a sober living halfway house 2 hours from my home, and I was trapped just like that because I have excellent insurance and everyone wanted money. The rehab was luxurious. It had a door pool, gym, hair salon, delicious food, and paddle boats on a lake. I slept in a cabin with two other females. They checked on us every hour at night with a flashlight. But it cost about $50,000 for my stay, not including doctor visits and multiple medications they tried to prescribe. The sober living place got paid to house and feed me, but from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., a different facility got paid for counseling and classes. They took us to a building every morning in a big van. I thought after 30 days I'd be transferred somewhere else. I do not have a drug or alcohol problem and never have. I have a psychiatrist and primary care doctor who have treated me for over 25 years. I called an anonymous free attorney from the sober house and asked what would happen if I left early. Would I go to jail? Have a warrant? He said no. I had fulfilled my 30-day jail term for the driving under the influence offense. Everything else was recommended treatment, not mandatory or court-ordered. So I left on my 8th day at the sober living place, sleeping in a small room with 4 other women who were real addicts and alcoholics. I am so traumatized from not only jail, watching women take their own lives after I had just had supper with them in the day room, but also the worms coming up from the shower drain, the food, having to use the bathroom or vomit with other people just 2 feet away in the cell. But I am most scared of driving or being in a car and being pulled over for absolutely nothing than having my entire life taken from me. It has been more than 2 years, and I refuse to get my license or drive. My husband threw away all my belongings while I was away and changed the locks. He sent my kids to their alcoholic, abusive, bipolar father, who is not their biological dad. My bank account went negative, bills were missed, and my credit score dropped from 715 to 428. I came home to nothing. Homeless, penniless, jobless, no credit to rent a hotel room, and no income for the last 9 years since my husband made me a stay-at-home wife. I am not even close to being okay. I am afraid to go to counseling because God forbid their evaluation says I need inpatient treatment. Cannot do that. Story 54. Taking care of my father as he suffered from Alzheimer's disease changed me, and I will never be the person I was before. Story 55. Being a social worker, I live with the constant reminder that everyone is one bad day away from disaster. It destroys me, but I also want to try to postpone that day in the hope that they get a break before they break. Story 56. A lady I found beautiful in my neighborhood surprised me when I saw her openly fighting with someone and using abusive language. Story 57. Partner of 15 years was extremely emotionally unintelligent, verbally abusive, dishonest, and unfaithful. Story 58. My parents. My father was a horrible closet alcoholic. My mother is immature and addicted to pain pills and hospital attention. My father was very protective of me when I was a child, but when he drank, he would be verbally abusive to me, so much that I cannot handle anyone's raised voice. My mother forced me to be the parent for my younger brother. She used to steal things from stores and blame me. The list goes on and on. Story 59. My niece is the same age as my daughter. She struggled with mental health issues and became violent as a preteen. I literally thought she was going to harm my sister. She ended up spending 3 to 4 years in a treatment facility. She is doing better, but everyone is still on edge around her. I feel terrible because at the end of the day, she is a child. However, I will never forget the difficult times we went through. Story 60. My former husband and I went through a divorce and custody battle. I will manage some of the emotional impact for the rest of my life. Story 61. Being young and facing the possibility of pancreatic cancer, I am really hoping I do not have it, along with finding out I have a condition affecting my brain and spine that has no confirmed cure, all around the same time. Although I have some amazing close support, it has been even more traumatic learning that some family and friends care more about protecting their feelings rather than trying to support or understand me. Story 62. I am ADHD, so I have had many small traumas that have accumulated over the years. If someone spoke to me harshly, I will be rethinking that situation in my head for years. If my mom tried to control me and tell me harsh truths, I am not getting over that easily. You will never know because I am a chameleon and people pleaser, so I take it with a smile until I burn out. Story 63. Either the loss of my father or watching my grandmother die. I did not realize that removing life support for someone with pneumonia is just taking the BiPAP mask off and watching someone struggle for 5 minutes as they suffocate to death in their own body. Losing my father and witnessing my grandmother's death have genuinely caused me significant harm. Story 64. It is a toss-up between a major, years-long, albeit temporary, disfiguring medical event as a child and my father deploying 3 times. Both have had a lifelong negative impact. I do not recommend either. Story 65. I survived 2 murder attempts by bullies in middle school and high school. They targeted me because of my autism. I was also sexually assaulted by an older boy who pretended to be my friend. When I was 15, I attended a camp to try to make friends. It turned out to be an applied behavior analysis camp run by Christian nationalists, which worsened my isolation and trauma. In my 20s, a very close friend of mine died from alcohol poisoning after she was raped by someone we both knew. Within a year, another even closer friend was murdered by her drug-abusing boyfriend, and the incident was covered up by local law enforcement. Story 66. I grew up playing RuneScape from about age 10 to 16 and spent most of my childhood playing it. I feel like I missed out on a lot and didn't care about school or relationships. They released a game-changing update called Evolution of Combat, which made me quit the game. After that, I started partying and doing drugs to fill the addiction void. Somehow, I started doing better in school after I quit and began using drugs, but I feel like I have developed an extremely addictive personality from playing that game. I still play it sometimes, but not nearly as much. Story 67. My grandmother told me throughout my early childhood that I should never have been born because everyone hates me and there is something wrong with me. Story 68. Being neglected as a child was traumatic. When I became a mother a few years ago, it made me realize even more that I was truly living with monsters. I couldn't imagine doing that to my babies. Story 69. The police and the public. Falsely accused of a felony and fought it for 3.5 years. Never been the same since. You are not innocent until proven guilty. It is very much the opposite. Never speak to the police without an attorney, even if you did nothing wrong. Story 70. My late husband took his own life while my daughters and I were at home. We found him minutes after it happened. I was in shock, my girls watching me cut him down while I was hysterically screaming. Story 71. Watching my daughter go through labor to deliver a stillborn, I felt completely lost on how to care for her emotionally afterward. I didn't know what to do or say. Story 72. Back in 2019 and 2020, I was best friends with a guy I met through a Facebook group about Markiplier. We were young. I was 18 and he was 16 or 17. I can't remember exactly. It started as an amazing friendship until he began sending me videos and photos of himself self-harming. He even video called me while holding a gun to his head, saying he was going to do it. He lost 5 dogs in 3 months. It turned out that when he was supposed to be training them, he would throw their tennis balls into the road. He lived next to a busy highway. The last I heard, he was in jail for animal abuse. Story 73. Parents, by far. Life would have been simple, calm, and loving if they had not been typical baby boomers, narcissistic individuals. Story 74. People who keep asking me about my trauma or treating me like a victim or a traumatized person. Story 75. I would say overall abandonment. I think it has almost made me feel like good things cannot be real for a long period of time because of that. I know that is not objectively true, but that experience has made me feel that way. Not to sound negative, just answering the question. Thank you for the great question. Story 76. Probably my addicted dad telling me I was the reason the family lost everything, which I still find somewhat funny. In a way, it is ironic to think that I was the one who cost him his job because he got caught using cocaine at work as a firefighter. Story 77. My mom went to therapy for over 2 years, and I still have her nagging voice and disapproval in my head. A classic narcissist, she ruined my self-worth, self-esteem, and many other aspects of my life. When life becomes too much, I can still hear her say how much of a disappointment I am, how I can't do anything right, how worthless I am, and that I am good for nothing. She said I should get an old and rich husband because that is all I am good for. Be kind to others. Be aware that words cut deeper than a punch in the face ever could. This is just how I feel living through the experience. Your words have a longer impact on others than sometimes physical harm does. Get help, be honest, and do not diminish your experiences. Just because others have it worse does not mean you do not have a difficult living situation to navigate. Story 78. I have not experienced many things yet either. However, I also feel like you that quite a few people seem somewhat individualistic. I hope it is just a difference from person to person. Story 79. A lifelong fear of needles was created by my pediatrician. I remember being held down with the help of my mom in order to receive a shot, and this was a very long time ago. The fear of needles has impacted my life significantly, and I am not getting a computed tomography scan I need because they want to use intravenous contrast. Story 80. I had a best friend in high school who I loved more than anything. I thought we were twin flames and considered them almost as close as a sibling. We were so close that we read one another's journals and diaries. Then they emotionally manipulated me into starting a sexual relationship with them, even though I never saw them that way. I just didn't want to lose them. They were also cheating on their partner with me while saying that they would break up with them. They were preying upon a 13-year-old when we were 17, and I didn't know until months later. I cut them off immediately. They then proceeded to harass me on every channel of communication they could think of, incessantly confessing their love for me while also claiming that I meant nothing to them and that they didn't need me, but were desperate to have me back in their life. They were also convinced that their basically rewording me for months was because we were in love and told everyone as much. They claimed that they had no idea why we stopped talking. After I blocked them on everything following harassment for 3 years and going no contact, they found my email and contacted me that way. I am traumatized because I thought they would be the last person in the world to behave that way. They were insane for other reasons too, but I was blind for way too long. Story 81. My ex flagged me as a problem and never allowed me to be myself. They always wanted me to act like a robot, never showing any emotion and smiling constantly. I am still traumatized. Story 82. Both my parents. I was raised in a small rural town that was mostly white and Christian. The people were not outwardly racist or homophobic, but the subtext was there. I did not realize it at the time, but now I identify as neurodivergent, transgender, and queer. Story 83. The time I was poisoned when I was 5 years old. My aunt was looking after us one day, and I was rather sick. At one point, she accidentally gave me the wrong medicine, and I ingested acetone. Although I know it was an accident and that she was sorry, I can't help that it still affects me. Story 84. I was used for simulated sex by my older brother when I was a very young child. I had no idea how deeply fractured my brain was from this until I was in my late 30s and saw a trauma therapist. She explained how exposure to direct sexual activity changes the way the brain processes and categorizes things. I have not been able to enjoy a healthy relationship because I had nothing to base it on. It set me up for a lifetime of trauma. This happened to me so young that I never stood a chance. Survivors of incest often become either hypersexual or hyposexual. I became hypersexual. I thought an erect penis equaled love because the person I loved and trusted used his erect penis to show me he loved me. I remember being 6 or 7 and worrying that I would become pregnant because he would ejaculate on my pubic area or stomach. I was so young I never thought it was abnormal. I didn't blame him and wasn't mad or upset at the time. That came later. I have been through the death of both my parents and much more, but I think the incest was the first blow. Story 85. My dad once committed a child predator crime, and a month later his lawyer proved a stupidity plea. A stupidity plea is when there is evidence to prove a defendant committed a crime out of sheer stupidity and bad luck. It is highly rare to find a stupidity plea truthful in a court case. Because the stupidity plea was confirmed valid, my dad had to serve 5 to 7 years on his criminal record, had no access to the internet, and only had to complete community service. I was horrified learning about all of this, and I will never get the trauma of knowing my dad is a criminal out of my head. Story 86. 1. Polyamory under duress or open marriage is a horrible experience. Having to make the decision to take dad off life support. Story 87. 6 months ago, I was drugged and raped by my father-in-law. During that time, my mother passed away, and a good friend also passed away in 2016. Story 88. Man, it's hard to pick one specific thing, but probably how much I had to take care of my sisters. I wouldn't say I was parentified, but I did have to do a lot for them. It made me hate my life and really made me desperate for any time to myself I could get, which made me aggressively asocial. We struggled a lot, and it made me hate the people around me. I attribute much of what I went through during that time to why I am such a negative, misanthropic person now. Story 89. Throughout my life, I've struggled with abandonment. My mother would randomly disappear for years on end and blame me and my father for all of her shortcomings. Sometimes I would be ghosted around Christmas time, and when my brother, who has a different father, was invited, my mother would blame me for not loving or ignoring her. Being my brother had no other mother figure, he chose to believe her, which turned him against me for most of my childhood. After I cut her out of my life at age 17, I felt better but still struggled with abandonment issues, fearing those I loved would leave me. I dated a girl for a couple of years and made her aware that I had abandonment issues, asking her to let me down easy if she ever had to leave. I nearly caught her cheating on me, and she disappeared from my life the next day, leaving a note that read, "It would have been too complicated to do in person. I almost attempted to take my own life that weekend, thinking everyone I loved would eventually turn on me if I let them get too close. It took extensive therapy and a lot of attention to my mental health, but I am better now. My stepmother was my hero that day. She heard my pain over the phone and helped me get admitted for help. I can't believe how far I have come in less than a year. If you struggle with abandonment, know that you are not alone, you are loved. And as someone who thought life would only get worse, I promise it gets better. Reach out if you don't feel safe with yourself." Story 90. Betrayal from a loved one hits you hard from behind so unexpectedly. You never really get over it. Story 91. Funnily enough, being in a behavioral hospital and psychiatric ward. A list of things I have witnessed. Sexual harassment between patients. An elderly patient arriving fully cognitive, 3 days later in a vegetative state, and then disappearing. Literal fights breaking out between patients. Patients convincing each other they have magical powers. I have been a victim of this. Being given medication that felt like the worst lobotomy of my life, and never truly recovering from it. Waking up late at night with an intense desire to die a day before leaving. The most intense feeling of suicidal ideation I have ever had. Numerous nightmares about being sent back ever since. It has been 4 to 5 years by now. Story 92. That's hard and my personal worst I keep close to the chest. However, I would say losing most of my friends, one right in front of me, has a traumatic effect that I still feel to this day. When fentanyl hit, it wiped out everyone who thought they had a tolerance. It was inconspicuous at first, 1 or 2 bags out of a bundle of 10 bags. And it walloped you over the head. I thought at the time many things, like they weren't cutting it properly, or it wasn't thoroughly mixed with heroin or straight off the brick. I believe they knew what they were doing and were advised by someone higher up the chain. Your friend turning blue, something you have never witnessed, on top of attempting life-saving measures. Sternum rub, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, etc. You were sweating and screaming at emergency services, and they arrive 10 minutes later, tell you sorry he lost too much oxygen to his brain. He is effectively a vegetable on life support. That hurts. I still think I could have done more, but naloxone was not available then, and you had to breathe for the person. Story 93. People who do not understand the value of human individuality. Moralistic people who have trouble understanding the importance and beauty of individual value systems. Nobody who does evil twirls their mustache and thinks that they do evil. Any invasion into the lives of people who hold the fundamental presumption of innocence unless demonstrated otherwise in that instance should be regarded as evil. Story 94. My current stepfather caused mental abuse that left scars which never heal. However, he is now living in a nursing home in Louisiana with dementia, stage 4 kidney disease, and some type of cancer. Karma is a consequence of actions. Story 95. Both parents, my brother, both aunts and uncle, half my middle school classmates, Several strange men who tried sexually assaulting me near bus stops. That one guy who tried taking me 8 days apart in 2 different neighborhoods. The time my car broke down near a burning cross at 1 a.m. in West Virginia. The 3 times my house was shot at. And the time I was standing in line at a 1950s-style drive-up diner and was hit and run over by a car. Story 96. Management in veterinary medicine. I have worked for privately owned clinics, corporate companies, many different departments, and various roles. The demanding nature is always the same. It is a shame because I loved what I did and was really good at it. Story 97. The girl I dated off and on for 12 years. I still do not think it is all her fault because she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder towards the end, but the mind games she played on me throughout my 20s and 30s really ruined my understanding of healthy relationships. Story 98. Growing up Seventh-day Adventist. Do you know what it is like to grow up with no future? Zero planning for the future because Jesus was sure to return very soon. Very soon. The world will be in the end times with many wars, destruction, death, suffering, sadness, and persecution. Do you know what that does to a kid? You become a bundle of anxiety and a person who thinks every bad situation is the end, that it is doom and gloom forever. Story 99. Nothing. I am a tall, white, straight man with all my hair. Somehow, the world was designed to cater to me. Story 100. My mother is deceased, and I express my anger toward her every day. She negatively impacted my life. My father was not a good influence either, but I cannot blame him for not wanting to be around my mother. Story 101. Cancer followed by a cheating husband. Those were rough years. Currently free of cancer and narcissistic abuse. Story 102. The fact that Donald Trump not only avoided jail after inciting the January 6th insurrection, but is now in power again after a disastrous first term and a clear warning of what we see now, is disturbing. It is alarming that many people are not upset by this. While not everyone is indifferent, enough are to be concerning. Those people scare me deeply. Story 103. My dad overdosed on Percocet when I was 16, and I performed cardiopulmonary resuscitation on him to save his life. It happened again less than a year later, but fentanyl was involved this time. Took 5 years to affect me. I had a psychotic break. I have been unable to stay out of the mental hospital for more than 9 months at a time over the last several years. He takes no accountability. He has no idea how he has affected me. He thinks he was a great dad because he was physically present in the house. He was nodding out on opiates all the time, and we all pretended we did not see it. None of us could look at him. We stopped eating dinner as a family. We never talked about what we had been through. We stopped talking to each other altogether. I wish I had let him die. Story 104. Found my mother dead on the ground when I got home from school. It was a drug overdose and I was 10 years old. It has been 20 years, and I guess I am still not over it. Story 105. My first boyfriend. The man who stalked me for 4 years. The unknown men who have sexually assaulted me over the years. Story 106. Teachers from my grade school days. I hate teachers because of them. I enjoy reading stories about teachers being fired and arrested for mistreating students. It gives me such schadenfreude. Story 107. So many people, but I think mainly my soon-to-be ex-husband. He has made me feel very insecure about myself. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.